Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. One of my goals is to make more recommendation videos, and I always try to find interesting things to talk about with my recommendations. So if you have any ideas that you want to see, let me know in the comments. Today I thought we'd do something that I want my channel to be kind of known for, and that is marathon reading series, because I love marathon reading series. I think it is one of my biggest reader joys. I just really like consuming a story as a whole. I'm not really a person who gets the books once they come out and then, wait between the books. My memory is really bad, so if I read a book and then after a year or 2 years or 5 years I read the continuation, I remember nothing. So for me, I prefer waiting for a series to be finished and then pick it up all at once. And so today I wanted to talk to you about book series that are finished and that I think are best consumed right, as a complete package, just marathon reading all of them. Now obviously that depends on the person as well. Maybe you don't really like doing that, but with these series I would say you really get into the nitty-gritty if you read them all at once. One thing I wanted to mention is that I prefer the term marathon read. There is a different term used for this as well. I don't really like using it just because it is associated with health behaviors that are problematic and can be very difficult for the people who have them. So I prefer using marathon reading, just, for you to think about which term you want to use in the future. But that's just the thing I chose for myself. So the way I have structured this is that I will start out recommending some duologies, then some trilogies, then some quartets, and last but not least, bigger series. Now obviously for marathon reading it is very helpful to have smaller packages, so I think maybe if you want to start doing this, choosing a duology might be a good way to do it. But then also, having trilogies and quartets give you the chance to really dive into these characters and these worlds. So I think it's not easy to decide which is better. So I tried to find the best of all of them, at least for the ones that I've read so far. So for the duologies, the first one I'm currently still reading, so it might be a bit weird to recommend it, but I have just finished the first book and I immediately wanted to go into the second book, and I have started it and I will continue reading it today, and that is the Radiant Emperor duology. So we have She Who Became the Sun and He Who Drowned the World, and I loved the first book in this series. If you like very mean, selfish, cunning, smart characters who are all fighting for their own good, then you need to read this series. It was everything to me. I was obsessed, still am obsessed with these characters. So when I finished the first book, I immediately downloaded the second one from my library, and I just need to keep going with it. So I think this is my first recommendation for duologies. In this one we are looking at a fantasy book that is inspired by Chinese history. We mainly follow a young girl, and she grows up in poverty during a drought, and so they don't really have any food, but the father sends his son to get his fortune told, and she goes along with them, and she also asks for her fortune. And so her brother is promised greatness, and her fortune is basically to be nothing. But then the brother dies and everything goes from there. But it's just you have a lot of political intrigue, a lot of military maneuvering and stuff like that. So if you like these kinds of fantasy, definitely recommend this one. The next one is kind of, I don't know, maybe a new adult recommendation, and that is the All the Stars and Teeth duology. This one is really fun, very different tone, but really fun, very adventurous. In this one you have more of a island world, and there is kind of you know, being on a ship and having like seafaring things and maybe some piratey things. So if you like this kind of like adventure fantasy, I would highly recommend the series. I must say that I loved the first book a little bit more than the second book, but I think they still are a good like package deal. And after I finished the first one, I definitely wanted to go into the second one and read more about this like world and these characters. I had so much fun with this series. Then we have a YA recommendation, and it is quite similar because I loved the first book and then I liked the second book. So I still think it is worth reading both, but the first book just was so good that I immediately went into the second one, and that is Dread Nation. Now this is quite different because in this one we are looking at kind of like an alternate history US, and there we have zombies, and I think this is after the Civil War. I'm not really good with US history, so I'm sorry if it's wrong, but yeah, basically there has been a war and now the dead soldiers are coming back as zombies and black kids are trained to fight them, and that is what we look at in this duology. I always thought I wouldn't like zombie books, so I was so surprised when I fell in love with this duology. So next up, let's go into the trilogies, and I have quite a few because I'm just a sucker for trilogies, let's be real. So the first one is the Greenbone Saga. Now this is one of those series where with the first book I wasn't quite sure whether I would like it, but just being so immersed in the story by reading it all at once, I just felt like I knew these characters. And so at the end, if you watch my vlog, I have a vlog reading this whole series, you will see me sobbing because I cared so much about these people that are not real. They're not real, but they felt real to me because the character work in this series is just fantastic. So this is a fantasy trilogy that is inspired also by like Asian culture, and we're basically looking at this city that is ruled by two rival gangs, and they have jade, which gives them heightened powers, so they're super fast and super strong and stuff like that. But basically, jade is like a drug, and so the jade warriors are trained in specific schools to be able to carry jade, and if just normal people who have not been trained use it, it destroys them more or less. So I love this so much. We basically follow one of these two rival families and their struggle for power. And it's just amazing. Again, if you like complex, selfish, cunning, smart characters, this is the one. Next we have the Broken Earth trilogy. Now I wanted to mention this one as well because I always see people talk about the first book, the 5th season, and then I'm like, but why would you not immediately want to continue on with this series? Because these books have a very different feel to it, so a lot of people who read the 5th season and loved it then don't like the rest of the series. But I think if you read them as a whole package, that is very, very hard to do because I don't know. The first book is very different because it is much more like mysterious than the other two books and not as clear in its themes. But we have this world where we have a group of people who have the power to move the earth. They can do earthquakes, they can get volcanoes to erupt, but they can do the opposite as well. They can quell earthquakes and they can stop volcanoes from exploding and stuff like that. And these people are hunted down, they're kept in captivity, used for, yeah, saving the world basically, but they have no agency. And in the first book we follow 3 perspectives and we don't really know how they fit together, and we get thrown into this world. And I love the beginning of the story because we learn that something happens at the beginning of the book and that basically sets off the end of the world. And this series has so much urgency, but then the first book has a very mind-blowing ending, I think. And so when you go into the other two books, it starts exploring the world more, explaining the world more, but then also you have like these answers from the first book, so it might not feel that immediate anymore, but then it starts exploring the themes so much more, which I really liked. So I would still say read this as a package. It's really great, really great. Next up, a series I have read a long time ago, so my memories are not that fresh, but still this was one of the series I marathon read before I started doing my reading vlogs for that, and I would like to go back to it someday, and that is the Queen of the Tearling series. So this is also a trilogy, but then later on more books were published. I think there's at least a fourth book, which I have not read. I have only read the original trilogy. In this one, we have a world where a woman who is not really prepared for it, I don't quite remember why, but she becomes the queen and she has to fight for her right to be the queen. And this world is fascinating because at first it feels like very like medieval fantasy and it's like all very clear and settled, but then you start having these things that don't seem to make much sense, and then it genre bends and it gets like a sci-fi kind of edge to it, and I think it is so interesting. And then again, I really like the main character. She's just a young woman trying to find her power, to be strong, to be confident, and she's also not very pretty, and she's also a little bit more curvy, so it also discusses these things as well. So definitely recommend, and one day I will have to reread this one so I can read the other books that have then come out in this world. Next up, this one I probably don't need to say much, but I could not talk about like marathon reading series without this one, and that is the Hunger Games series. This was probably like one of the first series that I just sat down and I did not stop reading until I had finished it. I read the first time I read the trilogy, I read it within a week. I know I read the first book in 2 days, the second book in 2 days, and for the third book I needed 3 days. So yeah, this is not something that I do very often, but it's just so bingeable. And if you don't know what the Hunger Games is about, where have you been in the last like 15 years or something? I don't know, when did it come out? So the Hunger Games basically is a dystopian novel where we follow a girl called Katniss as she is chosen for something called the Hunger Games, and that is a games where teenagers fight to the death. So you can definitely see that this is a very tense world and tense situation that we follow our character into. Next up, this one I was thinking about putting it in here or maybe not. This was also a series that I have read a little bit longer ago, and it is one where I also feel like the first book is quite different from the sequels, but the sequels are much better in my opinion. And so sometimes I'm worried that people only read the first book and then don't continue and miss out on the like really great stuff. So that is the Winternight trilogy. And the first book, we are following a young girl who lives in the like Russian countryside or something. Her mother passed away, and so the father marries another woman, so we have this like family drama, and then she's also able to see magical beings. So this has a lot to do with folklore, and there is like this ancient godlike being that takes an interest in her, and it's so good. And the first book is kind of slow because we are looking at this younger girl and her first like, this is the cat, I don't know what's going on. But yeah, we're looking at her first steps in the world, or like growing up in this like very small like villagey place. But then the second and the third book get so much more action-packed, there's so much going on, our character grows up so fast, and also the like kind of romantic tensions are so much more pronounced. So loved it, definitely recommend. If you have read The Bear and the Nightingale, definitely continue on, it gets so much better. Then we have the Stiefvater trilogy. This one I also have a complete reading vlog for if you want to check that out. But this is a trilogy that is inspired by Arab folklore. So we have a young girl called Nari, and she gets sucked into the world of the Jinn, and she finds out that maybe she's not as human as she thought she was. And again, with this one, the first book feels a little bit different than the rest of the series, and I think the books get better, apart from one perspective that I would like to completely cut out if I could. But yeah, it's still a very, very good series, and if you liked the first one and you're unsure whether to continue, I would definitely say read on. It's really good if you consume it all in one go. Last but not least, for the trilogies, again one that I have a reading vlog for, and that is the Founders Trilogy. And with this one, again, I would say read the first book, and if you kind of liked it, then continue on. I think there's like two kinds of people. My kind of people liked the first book and then it got better and better. But then there's also people who loved the first book but then didn't like where it went. I liked it because I wasn't the biggest fan of the first book, and then it went into a different direction that I loved. But yeah, you just have to read it to figure out which group you belong to. But I thought that the finale of this series was just so amazing, and again, pretty sure if you go watch the vlog, you will see me cry my eyes out, or at least that's what I did when I finished the last book. It was so, so good. And again, I think that even though you have bigger time jumps between each book, you still go on this journey if you read it all at once with these characters, see them grow, see them develop, and it's amazing. I loved it. Now for Quartetts, I have two. The first one has also been quite a while since I have read it. I remember getting the first book as a gift, and after finishing it, I immediately went out to buy the second and third book, and then I had to wait for the fourth book to come out. And that is the Dorothy Must Die series. Now, this is not a series how I would usually read it. It is not very like intricate. It is more like fun again, like definitely fun. So if you like, what's it called? The Wizard of Oz, but you want it to be more like modern, fun, adventurous with some main characters who kick ass, then I would definitely recommend this quartet. The first book is also much longer than the other ones, which is always a little bit weird, but I still overall had such a good time with the series, and this was like candy, you know, I was eating it up. So I would definitely recommend, if you need something you can really like fly through and have a fun time with, then try this quartet. And then also something I really liked about this series is that our main character is from a socially disadvantaged group. So she's not rich, she's not beautiful and amazing and super smart. And I love that about her, because I think we need more books from a perspective like that, also in fantasy and sci-fi, like not the like middle class, not the wealthy ones, but what is, you know, going on with the characters at the bottom of the social scale. I love to read about that. And then the other quartet is probably not a surprise, but that is the Raven Cycle. Again, I read this one a long time ago, but I definitely want to reread it at some point. And this series is just, if you like character work, then you will enjoy this. And I think you can appreciate the character work best if you read it all at once. So in this one, we follow a group of 5 teenagers, 1 girl and 4 boys. The 4 boys go to a school together, and that's why they're the Raven Boys, because their school logo is a raven on their uniforms. And then the girl is called Blue, and she meets them, and this has a lot to do with like ley lines and looking for a ghost and a treasure. And yeah, it's not about the plot. It's a lot of vibes, a lot of character work, and I just really, really enjoyed that one. There is a continuation series that I have not read yet, because I feel like I want to reread the quartet before I go into that series, but I think that second series is finished now, or at least the last book will come out soon, I'm not quite sure. So if you really like this one, then there is even more to get into and to marathon read. And that is a great segue, because now we have 2 like bigger worlds that consist of little series where I think you can marathon read them really well. The first one is the Grishaverse. Now, full transparency, I did not like the first trilogy in the Grishaverse. I was not a big fan. It was fine. It was just the YA at the time. It was all basically the same, but you need to read this to really get the most out of the whole world. So unfortunately, yeah, just get through it. Like, they're not very long. It can be done. But then after that you have the Duology, Six of Crows, and I love that one. I had such a great time with that series, and you definitely want to marathon read it because there is just so much going on that I think if you take a break between that, it's very hard to keep track of. And then you have the Nikolai Duology, which is where my heart lies because Soya is my favorite character, and this is basically the Soya Duology. It was just misnamed. And so, yeah, loved it. Again, with this last duology, definitely recommend marathon reading that, so you get all the goodness out of there. And I know a lot of people didn't love that last duology, but I did, and I will defend it till the day I die. So I do have a cat on my lap now, if I look a little bit uncomfortable. That's that. So the last series I wanted to talk about is again more on the candy side. So if you enjoy it, you have a lot to go through because it's basically, I don't know how many books it is now. So it was a trilogy, then there was a second trilogy, and then there were also novellas. So there's quite a bit to read if you want to. I have not finished it. I think I did not read the last novella, or I'm not quite sure. I read the 2 trilogies and some of the novellas, but then at some point I decided to just skip it. And this is the Shadow Me series. Now this is definitely candy, so just eat it up and enjoy. Don't think about it too much, but there were quite a few things I enjoyed about this series. So in this one we are following a girl who basically has a lethal touch, and she has been locked away, but at the beginning of the book she kind of gets out, and then the evil government tries to use her as a weapon. This is mainly romance. What I did like about this book is that our main character in the first book falls for someone, and then this is not the end game. So we do have her break up with that person and then fall for someone else, which I think is quite interesting because it is realistic to how teenagers are. And I don't think it is portrayed very often in books. And this is definitely not like the healthiest books, the healthiest series when it comes to romance, but as I said, I just ate it up and I had a great time with it. So I felt like I could mention it here at the end if you wanted something very, very quick to marathon read, because these are also books you can read within like a day or two, very fast reads. So that's it for my marathon reading recommendations. Definitely let me know what was the last series that you have marathon read. I would love to hear about that. Did you enjoy the experience, or do you like to be up to date and then wait years for the next book to come out? I would love to know, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!